and ask whether marijuana is just the tip of the iceberg in this new world for customers and investors. Stay tuned. You're watching Squawk Box on CNBC.
At Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try click and collect. Just go to tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try click and collect at tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores. Booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
Casa Bacardi is back, bringing a party with an unmissable lineup and tasty rum cocktails to London. With Bacardi's new Sound of Rum crew, featuring live sets from One Asen and P Money, MCing from Harry Pinero, and loads more. The perfect recipe for an epic night out. Casa Bacardi at Box Park Croydon on September 14th. For more info and to get your tickets now, head to boxpark.co.uk. Do what moves you. Over 18s only. Drink aware for the facts.
Strings and things. Strings and things. Strings and things. Strings and things. Strings and things and strings, strings, strings and things. Strings, strings, strings and things. Strings, strings, strings and things. Strings and
Now there's a whole range of strings and things called strings and things, including cheese strings, yollies, and new cheese shapes. Find them all in the cheese and yogurt aisle.
strings and things.
Public.
Welcome back to Squawk Box.
I don't think that. I don't think that.
I don't know what's going on this morning, but let me show you the futures. I'm going to try to do this in the most professional manner that I possibly can.
First.
Right now, it would be a first. The Dow looking to open up higher, about 220 points higher. The S&P 500 about 25 points higher, and the Nasdaq up about 85 points. Sam Zell and I just having a little conversation on the side.
Hey, the truth is the truth, man.
The truth is the truth. Exactly. Melissa Lee is here.
She is.
Melissa Lee, what's going on?
Here. She's investing the booming cannabis industry. It's a market that is expected to hit $83 billion in the U.S. by 2025, thanks in part to marijuana's new reputation as an all-natural cure for illness, boredom, or just about everything in between. Her special High Risk, High Reward, Cannabis Inc. premieres tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Pacific on CNBC. And Melissa is here. She's got a preview right now.
I feel like whenever I'm here, Sam Zell curses. I mean, that's the takeaway.
I'm not convinced that went out. We'll hear.
All right. Well, okay. We'll save it then. The cannabis industry is growing at a rapid pace, and it seems psychedelic drugs like LSD and ecstasy could be next. Even some big-time investors, including Peter Thiel, have already started investing in the space. Here's a look at why psychedelics could follow cannabis all the way to Wall Street.
It just might be the new cannabis. Psychedelic drugs, synonymous with the 60s.
Paul, how often have you taken LSD?
About 4 times.
Not to mention alarming side effects.
People are said to have died by falling out of windows after thinking they could fly.
Are now making a comeback. And in 2019, plant-based psychedelics like psilocybin, aka magic mushrooms, were decriminalized in Oakland, California and Denver, Colorado. Oregon is now considering a similar measure.
Free the spores!
All this as psychedelic advocates echoed the same arguments that worked so well for the marijuana industry.
Smoke some weed and smoke some more!
Including the most powerful of all, Turns out there's more research on the medical efficacy of certain psychedelics than there is for cannabis. And just as it was with pot, investors are taking notice, including billionaire Peter Thiel, the biggest and earliest backer of cannabis company Tilray. He's now quietly investing in the medical psychedelic space as well. Which makes you wonder, could psychedelics eventually follow marijuana all the way to Wall Street?
Psychedelics may be the future, but cannabis bulls say pot stocks are still your best bet right now. You'll hear why they think another cannabis boom is just around the corner and the factors that could separate the winners from the losers. Remember, it airs tonight, High Risk, High Reward, Cannabis Inc., 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, right here on CNBC.
This has been done before. I mean, you remember Timothy Leary and all of the, Ken Kesey, electric acid tests and all that. Are there therapeutic proposed benefits?
There is an ecstasy-based or MDMA drug that was designated by the FDA as a breakthrough therapy for PTSD. There's actually a lot of research done on psychedelics and some of the purported health benefits that they have compared to marijuana and CBD. So this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, marijuana, in its truest sense, could be the gateway drug for legalization of these other drugs.
Psilocybin or actually LSD 25 or what all those different things? There's mescaline.
It depends on what the treatment is, for what disorder.
It's amazing.
But opioids, PTSD.
Is this a conversation among a bunch of people who've never tried any of this stuff?
Well, yeah, for
me.
I tried one 40 years ago, and it blottoed me. And I don't understand how anybody could possibly compare LSD or Quaaludes to pot. I mean, it's just completely different risk and different impact on you.
It just seems like it would be maybe used for some type of intervention in some type of mental illness, I would think. You wouldn't want to go out and try to work
you're
on
not
LSD.
just taking LSD, but it's an open secret in Silicon Valley that folks microdose.
Right.
They take very, very small amounts of these psychotropic drugs because they think it unlocks
and helps
creativity. Exactly.
Whole new world. Well, it's an old world too. Yeah, I mean, this was done. I remember very well that all the Beatles, everybody experimented and sort of had to see if you would, I don't know, get closer to the metaphysical back then. I'm not convinced.
Harry Styles said he was doing it to try and write music and bit his tongue off, a piece of his tongue off. No, it was just I read it.
Wow,
shivers down the side.
Yeah.
All right. You're not taking back. Are you going back to do any of the other? You've had some great specials over the years. You have had some great specials.
You're speaking about one in particular.
Well, you just like to delve into the dark side there, Melissa, with some of this stuff. A lot of vices.
I delve into what people are interested in.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And in some cases, they do involve certain vices. That's not my only point. I'm not.
So there's Bitcoin.
Right. All right, we'll leave it there. I don't go any further on this. Anyway, I thought you didn't know Becky. I thought you were here to sit in, but that's normally when we see you. But it's
I'll just stay over here.
The big pot thing. All right.
She's here for Sam.
Yes. Oh yeah, here for Sam. Trying to get another one of those moments. Anyway, coming up, a fresh look at the trade deficit. Updated numbers are just a few minutes away. And we're one trading day now into September. The markets are already seeing some heightened volatility. What could that mean for the Fed and the slate of other central banks facing big decisions this month? We're going to debate that when Squawk Box returns.
At Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our Red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our Mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try click and collect. Just go to tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try click and collect at tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores. Booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
Oh, I found one of our new Vauxhall Griffin editions.
Yes. What comes as standard?
Standard? Well, alloy wheels, sat-nav, aircon, DAB radio, Bluetooth, smartphone projection and USB connection.
Wow. Is that everything?
Sorry, forgot the colour touchscreen.
Buy a new Griffin edition, Adam, Astra, Corsa or Mocha X Plus and get a whole host of features as standard. The Griffin edition range. All Griffin, no bull. Visit your nearest retailer now. Vauxhall, British brand since 1903. Participating retailers only. Limited units while stocks last.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
Casa Bacardi is back, bringing a party with an unmissable lineup and tasty rum cocktails to London. With Bacardi's new Sound of Rum crew, featuring live sets from One Asen and P Money, MCing from Harry Pinero and loads more. The perfect recipe for an epic night out. Casa Bacardi at Box Park Croydon on September 14th. For more info and to get your tickets now, head to boxpark.co.uk. Do what moves you. Over 18s only. Drink aware for the facts.
Welcome back, everybody. We've been watching the futures this morning, and after a down day yesterday for the markets, you are seeing a big resurgence today. Dow futures right now indicated up by about 228 points after losing just over 280 points yesterday. S&P up by about 25 points, and the NASDAQ indicated up by 80 points.
Okay, coming up when we return, breaking economic data, the latest trade deficit numbers, they are out right after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. Squawk Box returns right after this.
Yeah, I consulted with your grandmother's doctor. We can do the screening at her house.
Strength and things. Strength and things. Strength and things. Strings and things. Strings and things and strings and things. Strings and things.
Now there's a whole range of strings and things called strings and things, including cheese strings, yollies, and new cheese shapes. Find them all in the cheese and yogurt aisle.
Strings and things.
From the moment I saw you, the last of the litter, I knew you were the one, and we'd soon hear the pitter-patter of tiny paws on our kitchen floor, and tiny scratches on the bedroom door. You might sometimes be mischievous, sometimes be shy, but I know I found love in those kitten cat eyes. Join the free VIP Kitten Club from Pets at Home for advice and exclusive offers, including 10% off your first shop in store. Visit petsathome.com/kitten club or join in store. T's and C's apply.
John's just napping after a successful NEOP. But when he wakes up again, it won't be to an unexpected bill. Because unlike some insurers, Vitality Health Insurance includes our full cover promise as standard. So we'll pay for all his inpatient and day patient consultant fees in full. Isn't that right, John? We'll come back later.
Time to review your health insurance. Just search Vitality Health. Vitality. Positively different. Your consultant must be recognised by us and the condition and treatment eligible under your plan. Minimum monthly premiums, terms and conditions apply.
I don't even remember what colour this carpet is.
Bedroom looking a bit messy? Get to B&Q. Declutter while adding contemporary style with our fantastic range of flat pack furniture. And there's up to 20% off selected styles, including white gloss, oak effect and stylish grey. You can do it when you B&Q it.
I'm Captain Obvious, and every day people book trips on Hotels.com that you will later hate like. A hate like is when you like Becky's picture of another waterfall even though you kind of hate it because she's there and you're on the train next to a mouth breather. Don't hate like Becky's trip. Book your own with Hotels.com and get a reward night on thousands of properties. Hotels.com. Be there, do that, get rewarded.
Excludes package bookings and bookings using discount codes. Eligible hotels only. Reward night worth average price of previous 10. Taxes and fees payable. 18 plus. Rewards members only. See website for T's and C's.
Hello, I'm with Boots Hearing Care. You're straining to hear me over the background noise. You're experiencing what it's like to have hearing loss. If you've experienced this before in a busy restaurant or pub, you should get your hearing checked. A discreet hearing aid can help you follow conversation more easily. If filtering out background noise, just like you're experiencing now.
Turn up the things you love with Boots Hearing Care. For a free hearing check, visit bootshearingcare.com. Over 18s only. One free hearing check per year.
Welcome back to Squawk Box Live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. We're just seconds away from the latest trade deficit data. Let's look at the futures quickly. 226 now on the Dow are some of the best levels we've seen. The S&P up 25. The Dow's almost getting back yesterday's loss. So it's got a little more to go. It could have been much worse yesterday. We were down over 400 at one point. And the NASDAQ's indicated up around 80. The 10-year is now, wow, it's almost up to 1.5, which is above where the 2-year is. So it's not inverted. Rick Santelli standing by at the CME in Chicago, and he's going to bring us the numbers. The numbers, Rick,
absolutely.
Please.
Our trade balance, which most likely will be a deficit, and indeed it is for the month of July, minus 54 billion, 54 billion, and of course that negative 54 billion is about $1 billion heavier than we were expecting. We were expecting a number a little lighter than that. Rear view mirror, a slight revision, minus 55.2, now stands at minus 55.5. So sequentially, we've lost $1.5 billion, at least with reference to history. Of course, all eyes are continuing to focus on what's going on with interest rates around the globe, whether it's Italy's dropping rates or the UK or the US, of course. New cycle low for 10-year notes yesterday. They went from a little over 147 to pretty much a little under 147 in terms of their closing yields, and that's all I really look at. Intraday are exciting, but what goes into the history books are closes, and that was the lowest close, of course, since May of, 2016, from July of 2016. And also remember, July of 2016 is noteworthy for something else. That was the second of two double bottoms, July of 2012, July of 2016, right around 137. So, of course, we're all going to focus in on that. It does seem as though there will be a test. It's just a matter of when. Andrew, back to you.
Rick, thank you for that. Steve Leisman is here, and he is looking very studiously at his
do you guys remember when we ever spent any time with the international trade data? It's now very, very important economic data, very important political data. And I'll tell you what I went right to was the trade balance with China. Before I get to that, I just want to give you very quickly the overall, which is that exports were up 0.6%, imports down just a little bit. And it may be that the reason why we have a little bit higher trade deficit is because of people trying to jump in ahead of the tariffs. Let me tell you what happened here. Exports to China fell 3.3%. Imports from China rose 6.4%. So that kind of spike, depending upon whether or not those are potentially tariff-affected goods, maybe people trying to get in ahead of these tariffs. We've had this jumpiness in the trade data. So what I did is I looked at trade year to date. Very quickly, I want to show you. One way of looking at this shows the U.S. winning the trade war. And what I looked at was the first half of 2019 versus the first half of 2018. Okay, year to date through June. This is not today's data. And it shows that imports from China have fallen by 30 billion, whereas exports to China have only fallen by 12 billion. It looks like a win, right? Not when you look at it in percentage terms, because the Chinese imports are so much larger. Chinese imports are only down 12% versus U.S. exports down 19%. So this is the problem of economics we're going to talk about in a second. I'll give you on the one hand, we're winning in dollars. On the other hand, we're losing as a percentage. Let's take a very quick look at where the winners and losers are. Who took the biggest hit? Computer electronics from China down 22% in this look of year to date. Agricultural down 20%. Machinery down, these are U.S. exports to China. Transportation equipment, I think that's Boeing. And by the way, one thing to think about in the manufacturing data from yesterday, plus the export data, I don't know how what's happening with the 737 MAX figures into this data. A lot of U.S. manufacturing data Boeing has a big influence on. So we just don't know how to do that. However, you can imagine
their own problems.
Like its own, right. That's another issue. So that's why transportation equipment may be down. But in any event, very important that agricultural's down, machinery's down on both sides, electric's down here. A lot of people say everybody is losing. Well, you can make your own determination from the data right there.
All right, Steve, stay right here. Joining us now to talk more about the economy and the Fed's big month ahead is New York Times opinion writer Binya Appelbaum. He is also a member of the paper's editorial board, and he's got a new book out this week titled The Economist's Hour, False Prophets, Free Markets and the Fracture of Society. And Binya, welcome for being here.
Joe, you would love this book.
Thanks very much. I can tell. I don't think I need to even read it.
No, you should read it. You would love the book. This is your whole thing.
I'm living it.
That economics is science, right here.
Explain the false prophets.
I saw it in the journal. Yeah, it's dismal, but it's not a science.
The idea is basically, there was this revolution, a quiet and important revolution, starting in the late 1960s, the early 1970s, where economists become a lot more influential in policymaking. They really reshape the way that the government is managing the economy, and that has an effect on all of us. It ends up reshaping all of our lives.
For the better or for the worse?
Well, I think both in some respects. There are ways in which economists have significantly improved government policymaking. But on the whole, I think one of the big consequences has been that economists told us we should focus on growing the economy as much as possible, not pay as much attention to distribution. And that's been a big driver of the growth of inequality. And I think that has been really bad for us.
Can that be undone?
I think it can be undone slowly. When your problem is inequality, the solution is to start focusing on inequality and to be making policies that are explicitly aimed at reducing inequality. That's something we haven't been doing for the last generation. It's something we need to start doing.
Let's talk about some of the things we're watching today. And just front of mind for investors right now is this month of September. It can be a pretty scary time. Do you think this is going to be a September to remember, or you think this is one that maybe we kind of forget about?
I hope it's one we forget about. I mean, it would be great if things calmed down and the economy kept growing, but there's obviously a lot of risk out there. We've got a lot of uncertainty about trade, and it's putting a lot of pressure on the global economy. Central banks are really wrestling with how much capacity they have to help. They're trying, but it doesn't seem to be making a big difference, and they frankly don't have that much ammunition right now. So I think there's a lot of reason to worry.
Mark Grant has this very interesting theory that things are going to get crazier from here. He kind of looks at it and says all the other central banks, with the exception of our central bank, are really direct arms of the government. They do what they're told to do by the governments that are in power there. That's why he thinks we're looking at zero and negative interest rates all over the globe right now. I guess $17 trillion of negative interest rates. You think that's why?
I don't know that I'd describe the ECB as the arm of the government. I think it has a mind of its own and it makes policy on its own terms. But it's clear that policymakers are putting tremendous pressure on monetary policy to be the solution. It's really the only part of government that appears to be able and willing to address our economic problems. I think there's far too much focus on monetary policy right now. Our problems are in trade and our problems are in fiscal policy, and everybody keeps talking about monetary.
When you say the problem is inequality and not growth, it sounds like what you're saying is the problem is not enough redistribution. Not enough, taxes are too low, and government programs and social safety net and those sort of things are not enough. So it sounds like what you're saying is because the economists urged or motivated politicians to keep taxes low and grow the economy and not keep taxes high and redistribute, that was the problem.
I think that the economists were wrong about something very important. They argued that inequality would not get in the way of growth, and it turns out that inequality actually impedes economic growth. We now have data from the IMF and from other broad-based studies that show countries with high levels of inequality experience slower levels of economic growth over time.
And what do you think the role of the Fed should be relative to the politics of the moment? I'm thinking of what Bill Dudley writing this very controversial op-ed a week ago, where effectively he said that the Fed should be pushing back, or at least not enacting policies that help the Trump administration. He then sort of backpedaled in this other op-ed. There's been a back and forth on this, but what do you think the official policy of the Fed should be in these types of instances?
I read Dudley's remarks as a cry of pain because the Fed is in this really difficult position right now. But I think its obligation has to be, and the best way to demonstrate its independence has to be, to do what's best for the economy. They need to stay focused on whatever they can do to help. It's limited, but it's real. And trying to sort of play game strategy and figure out what Trump is going to do in reaction it's just not going to work over the long term. What they need to do is stay focused on, here's the economy in front of us. If it needs lower rates, it needs lower rates. If that gives the president more room to go off and exacerbate his trade war, you need to deal with that when it comes to. Your job is monetary policy.
You think Jay Powell recognizes that as well?
He seems to, yeah. I think he's struggling with the optics of it because it's hard to say that, independence consists of doing what Trump wants, but that does seem to be where we are right now. In order to demonstrate its independence, the Fed needs to kind of do what the president wants.
What do you think the Fed's reaction was to Dudley's column?
I have heard from many people who work at the Fed that it made them really uncomfortable to be cast in that light, to sort of even raise the possibility of behaving politically was a really uncomfortable thing for a lot of people there.
Binya, what's the right way economists should talk and get it right to be the most help to figuring out these problems?
So I think economics has actually moved in a positive direction over the last generation. We've seen a lot more empirical research, really looking at the data and trying to construct more accurate models of the way that people behave in the economy. We've seen a recognition that psychological factors play a big role. I think economists are doing a better job to some extent, particularly in the academy, of offering constructive advice. I don't think that's really migrated into the policy sphere yet. I think, economics has a job to do in sort of educating a new generation of policymakers about the importance of inequality and about the need to address it.
Back to the title of the book. Who are the false prophets that you're referring to?
Well, probably the biggest is Milton Friedman, who's sort of this elfin libertarian who dominates any room he's in, even though he's the shortest person in the room. My favorite line about Friedman, one of his opponents once said, you only want to debate him when he's not in the room, because that's the only way you're going to win the argument. So he's this tremendously important figure in mid-century America. I think the economist who had the greatest influence on modern American life. And his message is simple. He wants government out of the way. In his view, that's the solution to almost any public policy problem. And he's remarkably successful in convincing the government to adopt his prescriptions across a wide range of areas, from getting rid of fixed exchange rates to adopting the earned income tax credit, ending military conscription. His influence is vast and I think still underappreciated.
So Stiglitz and Krugman and others, they're true prophets versus Milton Friedman.
Well, we haven't tried their ideas, so I think it's hard to say how accurate it would have been if they'd done it.
Other places have tried their ideas.
There are countries that have pursued different economic strategies. One of my favorite statistics is if you look at France and the United States economy, everyone knows the U.S. has grown more quickly than France. But if you take out the top 1% in both countries and look at income growth for the 99%, it's actually been much faster in France. It's not just aggregate growth that matters. You need to think about distribution too.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's great to have you here today.
Meantime, I want to bring you some news. While we were just talking to Binya, check out shares of Starbucks, because this is what's happening. They are falling right now in pre-market trading. You're looking at them down about 3%. The company, speaking at a Goldman Sachs investment conference, and said it sees fiscal 2020 earnings, quote, below our ongoing growth model of 10%. And the next Starbucks earnings release is scheduled for October 30th, but this surprising investors this morning, so we'll keep an eye on that stock.
Coming up, we will take you live to London for the latest developments on Brexit and the UK's increasingly precarious political situation. Then we're going to head to Hong Kong for an update after the city's leader there withdrew that extradition bill that caused months of street protests. Stay tuned. It's all ahead when Squawk Box returns.
There's so much uncertainty and concern, volatility, the trade.
At Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our Red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try Click and Collect. Just go to Tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try Click and Collect at Tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores. Booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
Casa Bacardi is back, bringing a party with an unmissable lineup and tasty rum cocktails to London. With Bacardi's new Sound of Rum crew, featuring live sets from One Asen and P Money, MCing from Harry Pinero, and loads more. The perfect recipe for an epic night out. Casa Bacardi at Box Park Croydon on September 14th. For more info and to get your tickets now, head to boxpark.co.uk. Do what moves you. Over 18s only. Drink aware for the facts.
I didn't choose you, you chose me. When you broke from the crowd and pawed at my knee, soon you'll be feeling right at home. You'll be a bit unsure, but you're free to roam. What's good to chew? What's nice to nibble? Wet food, dry food, tin food, kibble? You might sometimes be cheeky, not always wise, but I know I found love in those puppy dog eyes. Join the free VIP Puppy Club from Pets at Home for advice and exclusive offers, including 10% off your first shop in store. Visit petsathome.com/puppy club or join in store. T's and C's apply.
Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. Take a look at futures right now. Ahead of the open, we are about 45 minutes away, and it looks like we have green arrows across the board with the Dow looking to open about 228 points higher, NASDAQ up about 81 points, S&P 500 up about 25 points.
And we're watching two big global developments closely, and we're going to get to both right now. Chris Livesay is in Hong Kong, where the city's leader has withdrawn the extradition bill that touched off the months of the street protests. First, though, let's get to Willem Marx in London. In the latest Brexit developments, I saw a lot of flashes coming out of Parliament and the Prime Minister today. New things since last time we spoke, I think, Willem. Update us.
Essentially, Joe, what's happened over the last couple of hours, Boris Johnson facing a barrage of criticism during his weekly Prime Minister's questions inside the House of Commons, the lower chamber of the Parliament here, earlier today. And essentially what he was facing in terms of that criticism was this demand that he allow a no-deal Brexit to be ruled out, and that he answer questions about what a no-deal Brexit would mean for the public, because his government has repeatedly refused to publish some of the details that it's been examining internally. In terms of his criticism of his opponents, of course, he's pushing now for an election after he lost this vote last night and looks likely to lose another vote tonight. They're seeking to block no deal as a possibility because they think it's so economically damaging. He says he needs it as a negotiating tool with the European Union to try and wrest some fresh concessions out of them, to try and get a deal through Parliament after his predecessor Theresa May failed to do 3 times. In terms of the possibility of a fresh election, that is still very much out there, but the opposition here in the UK is saying they won't allow fresh elections until no deal is ruled out. And because he needs a majority to call for those elections and has lost that majority yesterday, he's now relying on his opponents to allow him to go back to the polls nationally.
All right, Willem, thank you now. Let's get over to Chris Livesay in Hong Kong for the latest on the withdrawal of that extradition bill. Chris.
Hi, Joe. Yeah, just a short time ago, the embattled leader of Hong Kong, Carrie Lam, announced that she would withdraw the controversial extradition law that sparked off these 3 months of protests in which we've seen hundreds of thousands, sometimes more than 1 million people turning out to the streets, terrified that this law would give China the ability to pluck them from Hong Kong and bring them to the mainland for extradition and for trial, where they face a much more opaque judicial system. Joe, back to you.
Very good, Chris. Thank you. Andrew?
We want to get back to our guest host this morning, Sam Zell, chairman of the Equity Group Investments. And, given that we've been talking internationally and about China, the one thing that I wanted to pick up on from the earlier conversation that we had about sort of pushing on this and the point that you made, the Democrats have not really come out against the policies that the Trump administration, maybe the approach. My question was going to be about the approach. Do you think that the approach is right? And what do you do?
I can't help but think about the Army mule. They tell a story about the Army mule. How do you get an Army mule's attention? You whisper in his ear, but first you hit him over the head with a 2x4. I think that's what we're dealing with. In other words, the Chinese are very adept at not accepting anything. And so you got to hit them over the head. And I think that's what Trump is doing.
And how long do you think this plays itself out for? I know you've been waiting for...
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. There's so much here, in my opinion, that's in China's interest to correct.
Right.
And there's so much interest in the U.S. to do something that I think that sooner rather than later, people will come up and face reality. And I think we'll end up with some kind of a solution that's dramatically better than where we are today.
People who've spent time over in China say that the Chinese get their back up. They've got pride on the line on this too. So how do you find a solution? As somebody who's made a lot of deals over time, how do you find a solution and make it look like face saving all the way around?
Well, I think that, I've been involved in an awful lot of transactions, and I've been involved in a lot of, face-saving scenarios. And the answer is, if people decide that they don't want to be embarrassed, quote, and then they won't be. And if they decide that they won't lose face, they won't. And I think that the issues here are much broader and much bigger. And frankly, I think the impact of what Trump is doing to China is not lost on the rest of the world. So, Europe, that's had, among the most protectionist policies forever, is sitting there saying, gee, are we next? And maybe you are. And we got to basically change the rules. The United States can't, just like we can't defend the world and pay for it, we can't run a system where we run an entire economy for the benefit of other countries.
People forget that, Sam, that if Trump said, all right, everybody over there, remove your tariffs, we'll remove all of ours, we'd do it.
Sure, we'd do a minute.
So that's not the way it happened.
But I think the American people today probably think that all these other countries don't have tariffs.
I wonder why.
Well, because we've had a philosophy.
The way it's covered, I know, and it's the way it's covered.
Keep ducking the reality, keep not acknowledging the fact that the U.S. has been subject to terrorism for 50 years. The post-World War II reorganization was nothing more than a reorganization in which the United States took responsibility for the defense and the economics of the world.
But let me ask you this. To the extent that the tariffs are considered by some a tax on the American public, how long can that go on? What if a deal gets done? Is it a real deal? Does it have teeth? Does anybody care? And therefore, then what happens to the markets?
Well, I think that, yes, I think it can be done, number one. Number two, I think people will care because it'll have set precedent as to what people are going to scream about or not scream about. So I think it's doable, but it requires everybody everybody on the same page, everybody pulling in the same direction. And we've created an environment since the end of World War II where the United States took all the responsibility, and the result has been relatively disastrous.
Given all the uncertainty around here right now, what is the Zell family doing with its money?
I think the Zell family is very conservative. It's very diversified. It's very liquid, and it's very concerned.
Waiting for what?
I think waiting is the wrong word. I think preparing for what I think are very volatile times, where flexibility is going to be the primary asset everybody has.
Even though you don't see a recession coming between now and the election, you think it's going to be a lot of volatility and the markets could be pretty chaotic?
Without question. Down 285 yesterday, up 220 today, down 300 tomorrow. It's been going on now for what? Months.
But you're not somebody who's waiting for it to drop 1 or 2 or 3%. You're waiting for that moment it drops 10 or 15 or 20%, right?
First of all, I'm not waiting for the market to do anything.
Okay.
I'm waiting for the economy to, both use supply and demand to modify the demand. And modification of the demand leads to a slower growth and therefore opportunities to invest against the grain.
back in real estate or in other places at this point?
I think I wouldn't make a distinction just on real estate. Matter of fact, I think real estate is less likely to be benefited because it just is not having an oversupply scenario, which is what ultimately makes real estate attractive in a downturn.
If you had to buy real estate right now, is there a place in the United States you'd buy?
I think the answer is that we don't buy places, we buy buildings.
Right.
And so there's always a building worth buying. There's always a building worth selling.
But you say to yourself, right now, given the trends going on in the country, I like Atlanta, for example. A lot of people think that that's a hot market. Okay. Or Nashville's a hot market.
I don't think Atlanta is a hot market. I don't think Nashville. They may be hot markets in terms of activity, but both of those markets are markets with an enormous amount of supply that's going to basically dramatically impact the performance of that real estate.
Okay, so what's a market that 5 or 10 years from now we're going to be sitting here thinking, man, we missed it?
That assumes that the U.S. real estate market loses its ability to build when money is available. And the reality is that when money is available, we will build. And we have a lot more capability to build than we have capability to absorb.
Sam's our guest host. Stay with us. We're going to be right back.
Like fencing with a fencing master.
When we come back, we'll get you caught up on all this morning's market action. And tonight, don't miss Melissa Lee's investigation into the booming cannabis industry. High risk, high reward, Cannabis Inc. It premieres at 6 p.m. Eastern Time right here on CNBC. We'll be right back.
Every day, visionaries are creating the future.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
At Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try click and collect. Just go to tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try click and collect at tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores. Booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
Casa Bacardi is back, bringing a party with an unmissable lineup and tasty rum cocktails to London. With Bacardi's new Sound of Rum crew, featuring live sets from One Nason and P Money, MCing from Harry Pinero, and loads more. The perfect recipe for an epic night out. Casa Bacardi at Box Park Croydon on September 14th. For more info and to get your tickets now, head to boxpark.co.uk. Do what moves you. Over 18s only. Drink aware for the facts.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. AT&T has named media boss John Stankey to a newly created #2 role. This now sets him up as the likely successor to AT&T CEO Randall Stephenson. Starting next month, Stankey will serve as president and chief operating officer of the company. He will continue to run Warner Media, the unit that houses HBO, the Warner Brothers studio, and the company's cable channels. Randall Stephenson has been CEO for 12 years and hasn't indicated when he plans to retire.
He's a baby.
He's still in his 50s.
Still got a lot of time.
it's a baby. He's got a lot of things to, he's put together a totally different AT&T, and we need to see the fruits of being borne out. Took on some debt, but, look where we are in interest rates. Might have been the time. It's pretty smart at this point. Now, if the dividend's safe, AT&T, I think, is trading at new highs, isn't it? Have you checked it out lately? In the tea leaves, Sorkin, any reason to think that Randall won't be there for another 5, 6, 10 years? Is there any reason to think?
I have nothing which would suggest that he's going anywhere anytime soon.
I don't either. I know John Stankey. He's a tall man.
Tom is a serious man.
He's a very tall man with very large hands. When he shakes your hand, it kind of swallows it up, which I think that's good for a CEO, right? Right? A little firm handshake, big guy. But no time frame as far as you can tell, Sorkin.
Not one that I know about.
Does he play golf?
That's a whole other issue.
Okay, all right.
Get a handshake from this guy.
Just the AT. We will, yeah. All right, how much time we got? I can't find the clock up here.
We have 20 seconds, Joe.
20 seconds right now. Sam, thank you. Thanks for keeping it clean today, as far as everyone knows, as far as people at home know.
Yeah, thank you guys for restraining me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and that was a restrained Samzel, if that tells you anything. Anyway, we'll all be back again tomorrow. I have no idea what kind of show it's going to be tomorrow. We can only guess. Whew. Make sure you join us. Squawk on the Street is next.
Good Wednesday morning. Welcome to Squawk on the Street. I'm Carl Quintanillo with Sarah Eisen, David Faber at the New York Stock Exchange. Kramer is the morning off. Futures bounce. Dow looks to open up 200 as Hong Kong withdraws that extradition bill that prompted months of protest. Tons of corporate news as well, from Starbucks to WeWork, American Eagle to Alphabet. Europe's up about 1%. Bund's selling off, and our 10-year still below 1.5. We get 6 Fed speakers today and a beige book. Our roadmap begins with Hong Kong, Brexit, and a slew of international trade data. Stocks set for a sharp rebound at the open.
Plus recession risks with global economic uncertainty rising. We will get those latest tea leaves from the Fed. That'll be later today.
And an NFL blockbuster. The Dallas Cowboys agreeing to a monster contract extension with Ezekiel Elliott. Team owner Jerry Jones joins us here first on CNBC at Post 9.
Investor sentiment getting a lift on news from across the Pacific. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam making it official. She has withdrawn that controversial extradition bill that sparked months of protests and impacted the economic climate. Some protest leaders say demonstrations will continue, though, unless other demands are met, including calls for greater democracy. Some of the protesters are asking for a complete review of police behavior. No indication she's going to give them that as well.
I would say finally to this, right? I mean, they've been protesting now for 13 weeks, and this was one of the core issues that set it off. They've got other demands, but a lot of people in the market, the notes this morning are looking at it as China blinked. And that's kind of the theme today. We're sort of walking off the edge. The British pound is higher as Boris Johnson, the new prime minister's enemies, sort of go after him against the no-deal Brexit. And so that's providing a little relief to the market as well. But risks remain, including the fact that there could be a new election there, likely, and the fact that global manufacturing is slowing down. We're all still sort of reeling and reading the notes from yesterday's PMI manufacturing report here in the U.S. that showed it under 50, and what that tells. Is it an indication that something worse is coming for the economy, or just a slowdown in manufacturing, which was also confirmed in the trade numbers today?
Yeah, although in China, their own Caixin market PMI, highest since May. That's making the headlines, of course, over there. There are a lot of people who predicted that the impact of the trade war would meet the U.S. with a delay. And if you look at the two lines, that's essentially what's happened in terms of survey data. We'll see how the hard data comes in. But certainly the ISM number, first contraction in 3 years, as Sarah said, had gotten people's attention yesterday.
New orders particularly weak, 47.2. New export orders, 43.3, worst since the recession. And then, David, we got some new data today on the trade deficit. I mean, this is what happens when you start a trade war. You do see the trade gap decreasing, 2.7% for the overall gap. Our imports fell, and our imports from China were down 2% in July from June. Exports were down 2.7%. That's your biggest trading partner. That's what happens when you put up walls like tariffs.
Right. Well, I think Canada's our biggest trading partner, right?
Right.
But one of our largest. And we do, it's funny, it's always worth remembering, we talk about $300 billion in additional tariffs, but that number is actually coming down. Perhaps not as quickly as President Trump would like, although he does seem to also like the revenue that's coming into the Treasury from those tariffs/taxes.
And again, you get a tale of two economies in these numbers, because our overall imports in the U.S. fell, but there was a much bigger decline in imports of capital goods, computers, machinery, and that sort of thing. And actually, the imports for the consumer goods actually rose, which speaks to the strength of the U.S. consumer, which continues to be sort of this dichotomy in the market and in the economy.
Obviously, Hong Kong is where a lot of the news is happening this morning. Let's get to NBC's Chris Livesay in Hong Kong with more on these developments that we got overnight surrounding that extradition bill. Chris?
Yes, good morning. A major shift for Carrie Lam, the embattled leader of Hong Kong, who just a short moment ago announced that she would withdraw this extremely controversial extradition bill that sparked this protest movement already 3 months ago, that's driven hundreds of thousands, sometimes more than 1 million protesters out to the streets because they've been terrified that this would give China license to pluck them and take suspects of crimes to the mainland for trial, where the judicial system is much more opaque. However, it's really too soon to tell exactly what impact this is going to have on the protest movement overall. You know, investors who may be thinking that this is the time to see the end of this protest movement need to keep in mind that they've got other demands. They want Carrie Lam to resign. They want an amnesty for the more than 1,000 protesters who have been arrested over the past 3 months. They want an independent investigation into alleged police brutality. So there's still a lot of factors floating around here. And when you go to the chat rooms that these protesters use to organize, you know, it's a largely leaderless movement. So they kind of cast their vote anytime a major decision needs to be made. And right now, the consensus among these chat rooms is this is not enough. It's all or nothing. We want all of our demands, or we're going to keep turning out to the streets. This is too little, too late. Back to you guys.
Chris, thank you very much. Reporting from Hong Kong. Joining us now with a closer look at how all of this impacts the markets, Fidelity Investments Director of Global Macro, Urian Timmer, and Advisor Investments Chief Investment Officer, Jim Lowell. So, Urian, I mean, the characterization of the global hotspots sort of cooling off a little bit today, and maybe some better data coming from the likes of China, as Carl mentioned. How much is this good for in the markets?
Yeah. Well, you know, the markets are caught in a cross current, right? If you take a look at the markets from a glass half full perspective, you could argue, you know, with all these negative headlines, trade, global slowdown, everything, the market's only a few percent below its highs, and all you need at that point is for something to go right, and the market could rocket to new highs. So that's kind of the optimist view. You know, the glass half empty is that, you know, the market's in denial, kind of like where it was in October of 2007, where the market kept going up despite all these negative trends going around us. My sense is it's somewhere in between. You know, the Fed really needs to step up here and kind of feed the market, if you will, with what the market needs, which is more liquidity, lower rates. And obviously, it's likely to deliver on that in September. But, you know, as you mentioned earlier, the PMI is below 50, and you know, and the yield curve is inverted, so the Fed needs to act here and step up. And I think as long as the Fed does that, and we see any kind of moderate improvement in some of the fundamentals, I think the market stays in decent shape. But for now, you know, third quarter earnings season is coming up in about a month, and we're probably going to see a few more downgrades before earnings season starts. So at this point, I don't think the market is going to be able to get out of its sort of late cycle purgatory, if you will.
It's kind of the debate on the Fed, Jim. I mean, what Urian just characterized. He said the market needs a rate cut. The yield curve is inverted. The market is craving more liquidity. That's the Bullard view versus the Rosengren view, which is the economy looks just fine. Why do we have to give the market everything at once? Jim, where do you fall?
I fall in the latter camp. I don't think the Fed needed to cut rates when they did. I don't think the fundamentals would drive them there yet. I think our Fed may be tipping a little bit more towards trying to be proactive rather than reactive. I think that's dangerous. They need to remain data dependent. Urian mentioned that this market reminds him of 2007, or this economy does. I think it's more reminiscent of 1999. The divergence between large and small cap performance, between growth and value stocks, between the international markets and U.S. is about as wide as I think it has been since then. And back then, don't forget, as we went into a fairly mild recession, what we saw was the large cap market sell off dramatically, and what is currently underloved and overlooked, small cap value names, actually came to the fore and delivered positive returns. So I think investors need to definitely make sure that their income needs are being met, their investment goals are well aligned, but their portfolios aren't chasing this relentless momentum into large cap growth stocks. There are better values to be had, and they will serve you better when this market does in fact take a downturn.
You mentioned income. Both utilities and real estate sectors in the S&P closed at record highs yesterday. Is that still the place to go despite those kind of valuations, Jim?
In a well-diversified portfolio, they certainly can play a role, but you need to be very selective. We certainly think short-term bonds, cash. We know that some investors are reaching out to gold. We don't view gold as an investment, really more it's a tactical trading opportunity. But we think the best investment you can make in gold is to buy it and put it around the neck of someone you love. In terms of the overall marketplace, we think that this is a time where active management comes to the fore. We definitely think that just buying whole markets in terms of index funds is a risk mistake that we don't want our clients or any investor to make.
Jurgen, what is your strategy here for navigating through this choppy market?
Well, as Jim mentioned, a diversified portfolio remains paramount. And if you just take a very simple 60-40 portfolio, 60% S&P 500, 40% Barclays U.S. Ag, and over the past couple of years since the S&P made its initial valuation peak in January of 2018, that simple 60-40 portfolio delivered all the upside of the S&P, but only half the downside. And so to me, a 60-40 or some variation thereof remains a fairly bulletproof strategy because if things get better, the S&P or the stock side of the portfolio will deliver. And if they don't, the bond side will deliver. And so that's been a very winning strategy. And I do think that a combination of some of the bond proxies or stocks that have quality and dividends combined with maybe some of the secular growers will continue to be a good sort of barbell strategy. And, as downtrodden as EM is, especially with all the trade tensions, EM, I think, it looks interesting here just from a contrarian point of view, and that if the Fed does ease more, which I do think is likely, that'll take some of the pressure off of the U.S. dollar, and that will allow the dollar to maybe weaken a bit, and that will bring EMs to life as well. So that would be my recommendation.
Though it didn't happen the last time the Fed cut. All right, Jurgen, thank you very much. Jim Lowell, good to see you as well.
Getting some breaking news this morning involving Google's YouTube business. Our Elon Mui is in Washington, D.C. with details. Good morning, Elon.
Good morning, guys. Well, Google will be paying regulators $170 million to settle accusations that YouTube repeatedly violated the law that protects the privacy of children online. Now, under this agreement, Google will pay $136 million to the FTC and $34 million to the New York State Attorney General's office. In addition, YouTube must set up a system for content creators to designate their videos as designed for kids. The FTC said this is the first time any platform has been required to do that, and it will conduct sweeps of YouTube in order to ensure compliance. Now, the law does ban sites from tracking kids and then targeting them with behavioral advertising without the explicit consent of their parents. In the FTC's complaint, they said that Hasbro and Mattel were some of the chief offenders on YouTube's platform. In a statement, FTC Chairman Joseph Simon said that the agreement will force YouTube to change its business model and that, quote, there's no excuse for YouTube's violations of the law. However, the two Democratic commissioners at the FTC have dissented from this agreement. They voted against it. They said the dollar amount was too low. It should have been in the billions, not the millions, that it doesn't go far enough in changing YouTube's business practices, and that there's no good way for the FTC to ensure that Google is indeed complying with the law. Still, guys, the FTC did note that this $170 million penalty against Google is the largest it has ever collected under this privacy law. Back to you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Elon, Google faces so many different investigations. You know, you've got an antitrust probe from a lot of state AGs. Not clear how many, and it may be unveiled fairly soon. You got the Senate holding subcommittee hearings on the 24th, examining concerns related to acquisitions of nascent digital competitors. It goes on and on. The Irish government is examining whether or not they fed personal data to advertisers. It's sort of not going to end for this company anytime soon in terms of the investigations and perhaps the fines that follow.
That's right. I mean, this is really happening on a number of fronts across a number of issues involving Google. I think it was also interesting that in her dissent, Democratic Commissioner Slaughter said that she hopes that state AGs will continue to fight on this particular issue, children's privacy, calling on the state AGs to perhaps file their own complaints, launch their own investigations into Google over this issue, and perhaps receive an even bigger fine. There is widespread concern amongst consumer advocates that this fine basically amounts to a slap on the wrist for YouTube and for Google, considering the amount of advertising revenue that kids' content does bring in. It's one of the most popular sites on the web for kids. Does the punishment match the crime in this case? That is going to be hotly debated, but at least now we know what the structure of the settlement actually is.
All right, we'll look for some details later this morning, Elon. Thank you for helping us break that. Elon Nui in Washington. When we come back, we'll talk the business of football with Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. He's here at Post 9 as his team agrees to that reported $90 million contract extension for star running back Ezekiel Elliott. Will be the highest paid RB in the league. Take another look at the pre-market average move for the Dow the last 10 sessions, 239 points. And that's much like what we'll get at the open when we're back in a minute.
Introducing the first of its...
Moving from one rental home to another is so expensive.
Last time, we had to pay hundreds to move in, the first month's rent...
And then, a big deposit. With Romans, it doesn't have to be like this.
It doesn't.
At Romans, you really can move in from just £36, plus your first month's rent.
And that's it?
Nothing more to add. Move in from just £36, plus your first month's rent. With Romans. No deposit.
No problem.
Romans, your trusted local property experts at romans.co.uk. Conditions and monthly fee apply.
At Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try click and collect. Just go to tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try click and collect at tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores. Booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
Casa Bacardi is back, bringing a party with an unmissable lineup and tasty rum cocktails to London. With Bacardi's new Sound of Rum crew, featuring live sets from One Asen and P Money, MCing from Harry Pinero, and loads more. The perfect recipe for an epic night out. Casa Bacardi at Box Park Croydon on September 14th. For more info and to get your tickets now, head to boxpark.co.uk. Do what moves you. Over 18s only. Drink aware for the facts.
Looks like like we'll get some relief for stocks ahead of the open. What about bonds? Let's head over to the bond pits. Rick Santelli at the CME Group in Chicago. Rick.
Good morning, sir. If you look at a 2-day of 10s, you can see we've moved up a bit. But consider this. First of all, yesterday we settled at 146. That was a fresh low yield close going back to the summer of 2016, a little over 3 years. And the other key issue is the next chart. This is a 2-day of boons. Even though we're up 3 basis points from that new low close for the cycle, boons are up 5 basis points from their minus 72 low close. They settled around minus 70. They're up 5 basis points. They did have PMIs improve, and I think that's part of it. But it's very interesting to see some buoyancy in the Eurozone rates, especially with the notion that on September 12th, we are promised, at least the whisper promise is from Mario Draghi, that he's going big. And of course, this comes before he turns over the reins to Christine Lagarde, which in many respects brings more politics into the central banking situation in Europe between the countries that are involved in that group in the EU and, of course, Brussels. 10s minus 2s, a spread that has gotten more attention in the last couple of months, maybe than it should, but that'll be left to the future to write the history on whether that becomes a sentinel signal or not. But it is worth noting that we have seen some steepening. Here's a 1-week chart of 10s to 2s, and you can see we're flirting with 3 basis points at this point. Some of the worst levels were down minus 5, minus 6 intraday. Finally, the dollar index. Here we sit around 98.60. We need to be aware that before this recent move, the high going back to May of 2017 was right around 98.5. So even though today's a pretty big give back, 1/3 of a cent at this point, it is still holding what was, other than last week, the highs going back almost 2+ years. Carl, back to you.
All right, Rick, thank you very much. Rick Santelli. New York Fed President John Williams speaking in New York on a day where we're going to get a ton of Fed speak. Steve Leisman's watching that. Steve?
Yeah, Carl, thanks very much. John Williams, New York Fed President, saying in New York City that he is prepared to, quote, act as appropriate. There's that phrase again, to support the growth of the economy, job growth, and inflation coming in at the Fed's goal of 2%. You know, he says the economy's in a favorable place, talking about this dilemma that the Fed has, but he's concerned about risks and uncertainty in the economy. Among those risks, global growth, trade uncertainty, Brexit, Hong Kong, Argentina, debt crisis. He lists all of them. He says the economy's momentum, by the way, is already somewhat less robust than we thought because of the downgrade to GDP and to the downgrade of the level of employment by 500,000. Low inflation, he says, repeating something he said before, is the problem of this era. The number one goal is to keep the expansion on track, but he says they must maintain a data-dependent approach. Carl, we've had this before. Everybody agrees the economic data, not too bad. However, all the risks out there, and where these Fed guys differ is in what they want to do about it. Bullard yesterday talked about cutting 50. Rosengren yesterday from Boston talked about holding the line. Williams, kind of in the middle, but seems maybe more inclined to also cut. And just so you know, for your information there, we got a 100% chance of a September cut, but a 14% chance by one measure and a 7% chance by another of a 50 basis point cut. So that still seems to be a very minority stance that is out there in the market, Carl.
Yeah, Steve, it's not just Rosengren, Bullard, it's not just Williams now, but this Dudley op-ed doubling down on his entreaty to the Fed to not enable the president's trade tariffs.
Yeah, that's out there too, and I think the Fed is, I guess cringing is probably a pretty good word. They don't really want to be in this political fight. You know, it's funny, Carl, is that if the Fed wanted to say something politically, they might have said it. Instead, what they did is come out with a very strong statement kind of disavowing Dudley when it first happened. So it's pretty interesting that that's going on. You do not hear the Fed guys saying that except to say, look, this is a very bad card that we've been dealt that we're going to deal with the question being to deal with it preemptively. In other words, count on the trade war to go on and to cut preemptively for the potential of impact on the economy. Or do they wait until those impacts show up? We haven't heard a whole lot about how yesterday's ISM manufacturing decline is affecting their thinking, but I think it has to be working in there. The idea that you have the first decline in 3 years, and that the export numbers really fell through the floor. I don't know if you saw this, because I guess we talked about them yesterday. The lowest the export index in the ISM since the financial crisis, which is a number and a record you do not want to aspire to.
We're glad we have you with us, Steve, to make sense of it all, especially days like today. Steve Leisman, we'll see in a bit. When we come back, stay tuned for our interview with Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones here at Post 9 to discuss the business of football, this extension for Ezekiel, and the NFL's 100th season. Take another look at the pre-market as futures are up on this Hong Kong withdrawal of the extradition bill. We're back in a minute.
The Bond Report.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
At Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try click and collect. Just go to tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try click and collect at tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores. Booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
You're watching CNBC Squawk on the Street, live from the financial capital of the world. The opening bell in 3.5 minutes. Man, there's a lot to cover today. We've talked about Hong Kong, Boris Johnson and the UK, obviously the China data, the ISM. The Dorian recovery continues as at least 5 deaths as we're looking at what some are calling a humanitarian crisis in the Bahamas today. And then in terms of corporate news, Starbucks at this Goldman conference guiding 2020 EPS, quote, below the ongoing growth model of 10% plus. They're not going to give us official guidance until October 30th, but you have to believe, David, this reflects at least some pairing of expectations in China. We'll see.
That's the way it's being taken by the market. Again, they are at a conference this morning, as you said, Carl, and they did come in not with their official guidance, but with a number at least that, to your point, is below what has typically been promised by the company. Initially, the sell-off was actually more, so we'll see how the stock performs once we get the open. But when it was met with some selling prior, of course, to the open, so the volume not that large.
Maybe we should also mention that the stock is up 80% in the last 12 months. It's been a moonshot, really, so far this year, delivering higher same-store sales numbers under Kevin Johnson. Largely, it's been a story of exceeding expectations, right?
The last quarter was very well received, given the numbers they put up in terms of same, as you point out, Sarah, comp store sales and growth in China as well, which there had been some fear about.
Retailers in focus got a number of results. American Eagle, 39 cents beats 32. Comps a little disappointing, up 2. We were looking for up 3, but they do see the current quarter below estimates, 47 to 49. Streets at 53, and that stock's going to get hit at the open as well.
Yeah, Jay Schottenstein, the CEO, in the release blamed a delayed back-to-school season. Overall, American Eagle has also been one of the stronger retail performers, at least if you look at the comps. Did you see the numbers for Aerie? This is their sort of lingerie, more friendly to today's consumer. consumer kind of bras and underwear, comping 16%. So that still continues to be the story of strength, even though the overall comps at 2% were less than expected, and the stock is coming off on those missed expectations. What are you watching? I think the defensive sectors at the open are going to be the biggest thing to watch, because that was what led the charge yesterday. It was a down day. We'll see if we get more of a cyclical focus. That's who was beat up in August. And that's who the bulls are looking to for confirmation. The transports, for instance, which underperformed yesterday. The Russell, which had been sort of a serial underperformer in August, to see whether there's some sort of light at the end of the tunnel to the volatility that we saw in August and the 200-plus point moves that we've seen every single day in the Dow over the last few weeks.
You know what's going to surprise to the upside is Michaels, another retailer, which beats by a nickel at 19. Revenue also ahead. Expectations for comps were a drop of 1. They managed to eke out 0.3. And with that, Michaels is going to open up better than 20%. Just to give you a sense of how dampened expectations have been for retailers with at least some exposure to China. Let's get the opening bell here. The S&P 500 at the CNBC real-time exchange. At the big board, it's Comstock Resources celebrating its acquisition of Covey Park Energy. And you see Dallas Cowboys owner there, Jerry Jones. We'll talk to him in a minute. At the NASDAQ investment fund, Sutter Rock Capital. So we'll keep an eye on some of the corporate stories we've covered so far. Also watch Tesla today. Porsche is out with what some are dubbing the Tesla killer. It's called the Taycan, $90,000, four-door sedan. The report suggests that it's going to be profitable at launch and that they have about 30,000 deposits so far. I think 0 to 62 in less than 3 seconds. We'll see how much this does to get Volkswagen's hopes of becoming the largest EV seller in the world.
I mean, just looking at the opening gate here, we've got every sector in the S&P 500 higher. So it's one of those continued days where I remember Mike Santoli last week did a chart about how everything is moving in unison, in lockstep. You've got all of them higher today. And, you know, we've seen this pattern, all lower, all higher, which means that macro news is really dominating. You mentioned Hong Kong. You mentioned the sort of Fed speak in the air. And I think after that ISM number, especially what we saw in the bond market, guys, which was steepening of the yield curve on hopes that the Fed was going to be pushed in to more stimulus. Neil Dutta, for instance, put out a research note at Renaissance Macro saying they should cut 50 basis points. The market's not expecting it. Let them surprise the market. And now they've got a lot more ammunition to do so. We've got the lower manufacturing numbers. Inflation's barely budging. And global slowdown story is still there.
I don't know. Financial conditions, I mean, have they gotten that tight?
It's a good debate.
We're a few points from all-time highs in the markets. It's a big week for corporate debt issuance, and spreads are not sending the alarm signal, some argue, that the yield curve has. We had a big deal out of Disney in many parts. Deere, I think Apple comes this week as well. If you were truly seeing recessionary indicators, wouldn't you see corporate spreads respond?
That's the counter-argument.
Apple has been particularly good through the years at timing the market. I can remember previous lows where they issued enormous amounts of debt. Of course, they don't really need to issue very much debt given the net cash position of the company is still enormous, but they are returning a good amount of cash to shareholders, as we know, through buybacks that continue as well. But it is interesting to see their treasurer, whoever it is, have a good feel for the debt markets in terms of getting the paper out there at the right time.
Every Dow member is higher. Guys, just wanted to quickly check on Walmart and Kroger adjusting their gun policies in the wake of the mass shootings that we have seen. Kroger following Walmart, asking its customers not to have weapons basically in the store, to carry weapons. And Walmart actually taking it a step further. Kroger had already done this last year, stopping ammunition sales for assault-style rifles and handguns. Obviously, 2 deadly shootings at its stores in the last month have prompted some action here. Kroger's trading up 1%. Walmart, also, I mean, this news was out yesterday, but people are still continuing, especially for Walmart, who says that the moves will reduce its market share of ammunition to about 6 to 9%, down from 20% currently. There's the Kroger statement asking customers to no longer openly carry firearms into our stores other than authorized law enforcement officers. We're also joining those encouraging our elected officials to pass laws that will strengthen background checks and remove weapons from those who have been found to pose a risk to violence. So companies are stepping it up.
It's very interesting. It's an interesting time to see sort of companies making choices in terms of what they think will best serve their stakeholders, which is a word I think we're going to hear more often. McMillan also saying there were, unfortunately, a lot of people walking in to test the open carry laws, and that, of course, was concerning to some customers at Walmart when they made the decision to ask people to refrain from doing so, Sarah.
I mean, it's a delicate balance. I think it's why we've seen Walmart act tentatively on this issue. They've taken steps before, but clearly this is going to be seen as one of the bigger ones.
I want to get to a favor report, but I did want to mention Tyson Foods also. It's lower, not too much, but they did lower. They lowered their guidance.
Yeah.
They lowered their guidance range, citing what they called their short-term challenges.
Kind of one-time issues like, I don't know, commodities, derivatives trading, and then that sort of thing coming out yesterday after the bell. But they didn't really say anything long-term about demand, at least for meat.
No, and the stock.
They actually said it's going well.
Take a look at the stock. You can see it's been a very, very strong performer.
70% this year.
Yeah, getting to a favor report this morning. One name that has not been as strong a performer, perhaps as many had anticipated. It's a deal that was announced a little over a month ago. I wasn't here actually to cover it at the time. It was an important one for Pfizer and Mylan, of course. I'm talking about that transaction, somewhat complex, that combined the off-patent branded and generic established medicines business called Upjohn. Remember the old Upjohn at Pfizer? With Mylan. It's a reverse Morris trust. So the effect of it would be Mylan shareholders would own about 43% of the combined company. Pfizer shareholders 57%. It's not going to be done for some time. I think they're talking about July of next year. But Pfizer shareholders know what happened there. The stock declined rather dramatically, in fact, since that deal was announced. Why? Well, it's a low multiple business exiting what is a higher multiple, so it didn't have that effect sort of creating value in the sense of your moving out a lower multiple business. Now, the hope, of course, is, though, that the combination itself will set both Pfizer's business and Mylan's business on a new course. And the reason I'm mentioning it this morning is because Mylan is now going to become more aggressive in terms of communicating the benefits that they see from the deal that they feel perhaps in this first month of trading since it was announced have been missed by their investor base. And that is being led by its executive chairman, Robert Corey, a man who really built Mylan over the last 17 or so years as well, in terms of starting to address shareholders about what they feel are some of the perhaps things that are being misinterpreted by the market. What are they going to be pushing? Well, the idea of the combination itself is really a new company for a new age. And in fact is not necessarily a generic competitor. For example, has only 25% of its overall sales in the U.S., and of that only 15% is actually in the generics market. Worldwide sales, and in China, they're talking about having the scale they really need there to compete as well, given the combination of the two businesses. They assumed an 8 multiple going in. At least that's how they negotiated the transaction, got the exchange ratio, or got the 43-57 split. Well, it's not trading anywhere near that, and that seems to be something of a frustration at this point. These are early days, of course. You've got to go about creating a shareholder base for the new company. But it is worth noting that at the present time, you're talking about Mylan trading at about 6.4 or so times 2020 estimated EBITDA based on its total enterprise value, versus even the likes of a Teva. And that is a debilitated company with an enormous debt load, still trading at a higher multiple, or Sun, or Perrigo, or Hikma, any number of them. And so the idea here is, hey, let's try and at least explain to investors why this multiple is, in our opinion, depressed. What was most interesting, perhaps, about it is, of course, the idea that they're moving from the Netherlands. Remember, the shadow of Mr. Corey's resistance to Teva's potential takeover of Mylan a number of years ago continues to hang over the stock price and perhaps over his own reputation. That and a number of other things. But perhaps it's no longer deserved. We'll see. They are now talking about shareholders and being a shareholder-focused company, given that they are now reincorporating with new directors in Delaware, new governance, new CEO, of course. Pfizer's gentleman coming over to do that. But worth noting, Mylan shares up a little bit this morning as they sort of try to explain the story. We'll have a lot more on it. Perhaps even one day we'll have Mr. Corey join us. Carl, over to you.
All right. David, thanks. Let's get to Seema Momody, see what's moving this morning. Hey, Seema.
Good morning, Carl. Yeah, that's right. The U.S. market's on track to erase yesterday's losses in response to some pretty good global data and that news that the extradition bill in Hong Kong will be withdrawn. The Dow leaders at this moment, we're looking at Coke, Pfizer, United Tech, and Goldman Sachs. All these names traded lower yesterday and are higher, with the exception of Pfizer, down about 0.5%. Take a look at the Hang Seng, that's the Hong Kong stock market, back in positive territory for the year, but still down about 8% from its June high. And we're even looking at the dollar weaker right now, which is helping oil move to the upside. Let's get to that data, though. August PMIs from around the world have come in relatively better than expected, with the exception of the UK and even the Hong Kong. The average manufacturing PMI reading rose 0.2 points. Now, Italy, France, Germany, Spain, and the Eurozone as a whole beating and improving versus July, but they're coming off a very low base. China services also improved. So that's the story overseas. Specific earnings names to watch today. Arts and crafts store operator Michaels beating estimates by 5 cents on its bottom line, a jump in comp sales, and we're looking at shares up 20%. Keep in mind, its market cap still below $1 billion. We're also keeping a close eye on shares of Box, hedge fund Starboard Value, disclosing a 7.5% stake in the cloud service provider, calling shares undervalued. You can see shares of Box down 35% in the past 1 year. Carl, sending it back to you.
Seema, thank you. When we come back, Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones is going to join us here at Post 9. An interview you do not want to miss, given the news about Ezekiel Elliott today. Dow futures suggested a slightly bigger open, but we're up almost 200 points. We're back in a moment.
Can you customize the S&P 500 to meet your...
At Tesco, we can pop our pasta in your Astra, our red Leicester in your Fiesta, or our mayo in your Mondeo. All you need to do is try click and collect. Just go to tesco.com, order your shopping, then click and collect. With the minimum basket spend now only £25. And if you fancy something a little more exotic, we can even put our pad thai in your Qashqai. Try click and collect at tesco.com. Every little helps. Selected larger stores. Booking charge may apply. See online for full terms and conditions.
This one shouldn't take long. Of course, if it had a cover, I might not be bothered. Can't see what's under there. And then they'd have chained the back wheel. It would have taken me much longer, especially if the chain's off the ground. Makes it harder to cut. This one doesn't even have a lock on the front. So, in the time I've been talking to you, I've nicked it.
Over 9,000 scooters and motorbikes were stolen in London last year. Lock your bike, chain the rear wheel, and cover it to make it harder to steal. Lock, chain, cover. The Met Police.
For people who want to feel happier, stronger, fitter, get further, faster, better. For people who want to, but don't always manage to. It doesn't matter how you want to do it, who you want to do it with. It matters that you want to. Virgin Active. We'll find a way for you. Join in September and get 15% off each month on 12-month memberships. Visit virginactive.co.uk. Participating gyms. Terms and conditions apply.
Casa Bacardi is back, bringing a party with an unmissable lineup and tasty rum cocktails to London. With Bacardi's new Sound of Rum crew, featuring live sets from One Nason and P Money, MCing from Harry Pinero, and loads more. The perfect recipe for an epic night out. Casa Bacardi at Box Park Croydon on September 14th. For more info and to get your tickets now, head to boxpark.co.uk. Do what moves you. Over 18s only. Drink aware for the facts.
I didn't choose you. You chose me. When you broke from the crowd and pawed at my knee, soon you'll be feeling right at home. You'll be a bit unsure, but you're free to roam. What's good to chew? What's nice to nibble? Wet food, dry food, tin food, kibble? You might sometimes be cheeky, not always wise, but I know I found love in those puppy dog eyes. Join the free VIP Puppy Club from Pets at Home for advice and exclusive offers, including 10% off your first shop in store. Visit petsathome.com/puppy club or join in store. T's and C's apply.
Strength and things. Strength and things. Strength and things. Strings and things. Strings and things and strings, strings, strings and things. Strings, strings, strings and things. Strings, strings, strings and things. Strings and
Now there's a whole range of strings and things called strings and things, including cheese strings, yollies, and new cheese shapes. Find them all in the cheese and yogurt aisle.
Strings and things.
The NFL's 100th season set to kick off in just one day, and who better to talk about that than NFL Hall of Famer, Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones, who's with us here at Post 9 after ringing the opening bell with Comstock Resources here this morning at the NYSE. Jerry, thank you for coming by. It's great to see you.
Well, it's great to be here on the floor of the stock exchange. I feel like I'm having breakfast with George Washington and right down the street from many of the great names of our history.
Yeah. We were just talking off camera. Today's a day with news with your two loves, which is football and exploration and production. Let's first do Covey Park and what Comstock's buying here. What's the story?
First of all, the way I bought the Cowboys was my career and the money that I've earned from being involved in oil and gas exploration, particularly gas. And Comstock has one of the best positions of leases relative to the cheapest place, I would say, in the world to get gas to the market. I'm a big believer in what natural gas is. And I've always believed that the time to get involved is when things are low. That's the way I bought the Cowboys. The Cowboys were losing $1 million a month, and I bought 15% of the Cowboys from the FDIC. A lot of people don't realize that. Well, before that, I'd gone in the oil and gas business when it was low, and geologists were going to work selling shoes. And so I've always been a little contrarian in my approach to things. So this is the time to do it in the natural gas business, and I've spent roughly $1.5 billion over the last probably 36 months investing in oil and gas.
What do you think it's going to take to turn sentiment around on exploration and production?
Well, I want to, through Comstock, I would say look at what we've been doing, look at what I've been doing. I understand some frustration with investors. That's not what's been happening to me. I've taken millions of dollars and invested it since 2017. And I've turned that into 2 and 3 times my money. And we're doing the same thing with Comstock. And they've done a great job with Covey Park and acquiring a lot of leases. These leases are right in the pathway to the great markets of the Gulf as far as natural gas is concerned. And so that whether it's a ball team or whether it's a piece of land in North Dallas, in this particular case, natural gas, that gets my attention.
We want to make it clear, you've put a lot of money in here. I mean, what, over $1 billion at this point?
I have. As far as over the last 40 months, I've invested over $1.5 billion in gas prospects, drilling, producing wells, and am continuing that kind of aggressiveness. In my mind, this is the time to do it. Now, it's very important that you keep the cash, you keep up with the drilling, or you keep up with
But how much of it is dependent on the price of the actual commodity starting to trend up, or is this really, even if we stay where we are, you believe that
any commodity has market sensitivity. On the other hand, natural gas for energy is our cleanest fuel. Plus, we have opened up, since 2016, we have opened up the markets of the world to natural gas. That's why I'm here. Someone asked me, are you looking at the waiver wire so that we can make sure we've got our roster put together? Yeah, and at the same time, I'm looking out the other corner of my eye at a good place to drill a well.
Speaking of rosters, what does signing Zeke mean? What does this extension mean for the team, for the season, for getting past the division, all of that?
Well, I just turned my pockets out upstairs. It means I'm $100 million lighter as of this morning. But seriously, Zeke has been arguably our best player. I'm not trying to be unfair to anybody else, but he's an incremental part to our success. We're glad to get him booked in. We're glad to have him on the team. He plays a position that has some pretty interesting dynamics to it, because running backs are short-lived, although we had what I consider to be one of the top 5 greatest ones in Emmitt Smith. And Emmitt ran the ball for 13 years, so you don't have to have a 4 or 5 year career to be a running back. On the other hand, Zeke allows us to create such problems for the defense that then we can open it up to our passing, open it up for Dak Prescott. Of course, we got to have some guys on defense to get those guys the ball. That's what this is all about.
Can we say that Zeke is better than Emmett ever was?
No, I don't want to say that. Zeke wouldn't want me to say that. But I will say this. They both have a lion heart. And believe it or not, Bill Parcells used to give lectures on just how lion-hearted a running back has to be. They're continually taking the pounding. They continually have to gather it up and go some more. Who could forget against the New York Giants, Emmitt Smith running with a knockdown shoulder to win that game when we had to win it to go to the playoffs that ultimately led us to a Super Bowl. Zeke has a big heart. Now he's got a thick pocketbook, too.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first 9-figure contract for a running back.
Yeah. And
what do you say to those who tell you you're overpaying?
Well, first of all, I would say that anybody, when you're talking about that kind of money, we're all overpaid, if you really wanted to look at it that way. For what he has done, how he's worked, how he's utilized his skills, then he's in the marketplace of where we are in pro sports and pro football.
Jerry, what do you think it's going to take to get a streaming NFL deal for games that are tentpole games, like a Sunday night on YouTube, Amazon, something beyond what we've seen already so far?
Oh, I think that we're in such a world of change, if you will, on how we present our games. When I first got involved in the NFL, content to me was what's in a popcorn box. It was popcorn. The word content, what is that? Well, content, as it turns out, was about what goes on that television. You know, the NFL's interest culminates in the fourth quarter of the year. No other sport has its hot time. That's Christmas and Thanksgiving. That's when you want those decision makers in front of that TV set. And then we have natural breaks. They're called huddles. They're called stoppages. They're not intrusive, so that we can put many messages up there at the same time. And then more important than anything, the NFL, and I'm talking about content, whether it's on or off the field, in season or out, there's a soap opera going on every day. It's a gift to television because it's constantly on the forefront of attention and interest.
And those contracts, of course, have greatly added to the value of your franchise and to the value overall of the NFL. I'm curious how you view the next one coming up. I think CBS is a couple of years away. Do you think there's going to be a lot of competition from players we haven't typically seen in terms of trying to secure those rights?
Well, I think that we have a history of a collective bargain agreement. That means the players and the clubs agree on how much dollars, what percentage of dollars are going to be there. For almost the last 10 weeks, about every Monday or Tuesday, I've been in Chicago or parts nearby negotiating with the Players Association about our future labor agreement. We all know it would be better to get something done now than 2 years from now when you could possibly have work stoppages, because this would allow us to have a great platform of continuity, an agreement for years, that we can go to the networks and address this streaming, address what our game is going to look like on that tube. That's why we're doing it. That's why the players are doing it. We're all working hard to get a deal done.
Still, NFL ratings have been a little soft in recent seasons. I mean, do you think that you can grow broadcast television ratings in the U.S., or are we at peak football?
That's such a misnomer that our ratings are soft. They're the hardest thing there is in all of television viewing. In general, all television has depreciated. The viewership, it has, if you will, it has gone to those handheld, it's gone to other areas. And of course, the NFL wants to be a very substantive part of the alternatives to the traditional television screen. But on the other hand, a funny thing happened. The more the percentage of fans or the percentage of viewers watch all programming, the more valuable the NFL has gotten. Because we are where you can get the guaranteed highest percentage of the decision makers in this country in front of the set. So just the opposite. The idea of where we are with our viewership is so much stronger than when I got in the NFL in 1989 or when Fox came in the early 90s. We're really in a very strong position in time.
Do you think we're past the kneeling controversy, and would you have done anything differently looking back?
Well, I think that we all recognize the social issues. I would have never dreamed when I got involved with the Cowboys that I would be addressing bullying or I would be addressing these social issues. But then I stop and think about it. If we're going to get up and ask everybody to look at us, when you turn away, wait, get back over here, look at us. If we're going to ask this country to look at us, then along with that comes the responsibility when we get it done, we have all those eyeballs, when the country says, help us out a little bit on social issues, use those platforms to help us as a society. So I have a different view, let's say, than I had 20, 30 years ago when I first got involved. Where I think that we are is that we are evolving in our understanding. We have always, the Cowboys are where we are. Everybody knows where we stand. But on the other hand, what I want to be sure that everybody understands is how interested we are in helping that first responder be safe. How interested we are when we have unjust, if you will, unjust circumstances that really are unfortunate. We want to have the NFL be a part of making sure that we're doing everything we can to help those areas. Now, you can't arm wave. If you could solve all these problems, you'd be God. You can't do that. But what you can do is try. We have a lot of visibility. We have huge numbers of fans. We want to use all of that to help these social issues where we can.
There are also health issues. Jerry, Andrew Luck retired last week at 29. He cited pain and injury. How worried are you that people start walking away because of health concerns?
I just want to be sure that we talk about the whole story. I had a long career through college. I played for 5 years in college. And so that very aware of the kinds of health issues that after you've done that, then when you're 77, which I am, how you feel, how you walk, how you think. One of the most concussed players that have ever put on a helmet in the NFL is Roger Staubach. He's my age.